Welcome Dan Marr with High Tide Permaculture, and let's talk about water.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name's Dan Marr. And I'm going to back up what just Brad went over, but I'm going to give it through the lens of permaculture. And if you take a look at this first slide here, I'll give credit. This is from Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, their water center. They're down in Occidental outside of Sebastopol. But they took the water cycle. This is the water cycle we learned about back in 5th and 6th grade. And they changed a few things to it. So I want you to take a look at this because this is really going to guide my presentation here today, right? So we have the physics of water, these changes of state. So water evaporates, it rises, it condenses, precipitation happens, and then the runoff and continues this water cycle. But in permaculture, we take a look at what's going on from the precip hitting the earth and the runoff back to the lake, the ocean, before evaporation. So what role do we play in this portion here of the water cycle? So, we know what water is, we know what water is capable of doing, right? It's this infinite resource, it's a cycle. It regulates Earth's temperatures, it passes through every living creature, it transports nutrients, and it creates spectacular visual displays, whether those are rainbows or the Grand Canyon. However, as humans, we've taken water and we've made it a utility. And when we turn things into utilities, they are no longer infinite. They become finite. So today what I want to present to you is an integrated design approach to looking at water. And through this design approach, we're going to look at the reduction of overall costs and maintenance, an increase in yields, and most importantly, protecting environmental integrity. So I'm going to put a few permaculture terms out there for you, so when I throw these out, you're not totally stumped on what I'm talking about. This is where I'm going with you today. These are systems, and all of these systems are integrated in permaculture design. Each system serves functions. Multiple functions. So if we integrate multiple systems which serve multiple functions, then the overall system, water, is exponential in the functions that it can provide. And I use the chicken as an example. Think of all the functions that chicken serves. Eggs, feather, meat, pest control, right? Composting. It's endless. So the chicken is kind of like the poster animal for stacking functions. So it's a system, but within the system, there's many functions that that particular system serves. So we're going to go through management plans, rainwater, and then lastly, our place in the watershed. All right. So here we are. The definition of permaculture takes many forms, but when it comes down to it, it's the establishment of human settlements within the scope of natural systems. Right? So if we look at how we manage forests or we manage landscapes in urban and suburban environments, that plays a huge role in the quality and quantity of water. So what we have here is, this is a creek that has been dewatered, meaning historically water used to flow through this creek, but it no longer does. Now that's not because of upstream diversions, it's because of bad forest management practices. So this area, the last time it was logged was in the early 80s, and then it was left to grow. And pepperwoods and Doug fir completely took it over, completely choked it out, and drained this creek of water. So paying attention to how we manage our land is also going to determine the quality and quantity of water. There's other functions that good forest management practices serve. We're reducing fuel loads, We're also reducing pest and mold populations because we've removed all of that decomposing material out of there. And lastly, like I pointed out, we are now rewatering systems that have been dewatered because of poor management. So that was one system, integrated with another system. And this is rainwater. I'm a huge proponent of rainwater. If we look at rainwater, we're going to look at it in two terms. Number one is harvesting. And when I say harvesting, I mean we're putting water in the ground. We're recharging groundwater supplies. We're bringing that water table back up to the surface again. We do this through systems of earthworks. What we have here is we have a swale that meanders across the site, and then it terminates in what's called an infiltration basin. Now I want you to take a look. This was done in November. It had rained about 1.5 inches from October through November at the end of the dry season. Most of that water was quickly evaporated or was absorbed into the soil. As we got in and started installing this system, you'll see we followed the original path of water. Can you see water down here? This is about 10 inches deep when we hit water, because that's where the water was. We paid attention to where it's going and where it is. So like I said, this is after very little rain at the very end of the dry season. So water's in the ground. It's the largest tank we could ever imagine having. So how can we participate in this system of water? The other thing that's happening is through this system of swales and putting in check dams, we're slowing down the flow of water, so we're reducing erosion. We're also not allowing nutrients, topsoil, to be lost off of the surface. This is about 35 feet long, and this site here harvests 24,000 gallons of water in the ground. There's the proof in the pudding. That's the site 3 years later. Not a single hose was ever turned on. It was exclusively from water that was harvested in the ground. You can't even see the swale system in here. So it's easy for us to be cynical about Humboldt County in a normal rain year. It's like, oh, it rains all the time. Humboldt County in a drought year. Oh, why would we even talk about this? It's not even raining. Well, we need to look at the math of that. So here's larger scale. Here is rural environment. In rural environments, we work with things that are called key points. And on these key points, we find contour lines and we dig key line swales. Here's an illustration on how these work. Grass is essentially an impervious surface. If you look at the topsoil of grass, it's about 2 inches deep. Below that, clay, depending on your sediments. But water tends to shed, especially on slope off of grass. So if we strategically put in these harvesting systems, like this one here, which is 140 feet long, we can slow that flow down and allow it to infiltrate and recharge that groundwater supply. So this swale here, that's 140 feet long, its standing volume is over 6,000 gallons. That's standing volume. However, if you look at the space above it, the space above it is 1 acre. So you're talking about 27,000 gallons on this surface up here. So essentially the surface above it can cycle through here over 4 times. So the capacity of the earth to hold water is infinite if we just pay attention to where that water is. So finding these key point locations on a hillside. We can look at erosion signs, right? So we know that water falls in this particular small watershed. It runs down, creates these little rills and gullies, and comes down to the bottom where we have pasture land. Well, later in the season, if we look right here, there was a nice green spot. So what's happening is the subsurface water is still doing the same thing. And this is what we call a key point. And this is where we draw our key lines from that point. And we can literally pull water out to the edges where it's already dry. And we can spread that water out over a wider surface. And what we're doing there is expanding the tank. Because if you think of this as a tank right now, we could make this whole entire landscape the tank. Being able to read topo maps is really important. Because, like I said, some creeks have been dewatered, and others are just seasonal. So being able to read topo maps and finding out where in the landscape is there a potential for water to be moving through, and how can we focus on that? So, harvesting, managing our lands, harvesting water in the ground. Now we get into catchment. Catchment is anything where we're talking about tanks, bladders, ponds are catchment. Here's the math. 1 inch of rain on 1,000 square feet is 600 gallons of water. The average home in Arcata is 1,000 square feet. I was kind of mapping out in my head, but this red curtain here is just under 1,000 square feet. So every inch of rain that would fall on that is the equivalent of 600 gallons. The other functions that rainwater catchment serves is now you have water security. You have water for fire suppression. The overflow, because of this math, tanks will fill quickly, can be going into your recharge systems. If roofs aren't available, retention ponds, creating vernal habitat. And as of last year, the Rainwater Catchment Act of 2012, rainwater catchment is now exempt. The water on your roof belongs to you. So, still don't believe me in rainwater catchment? Here's the math. This is, as of March 31st of this year, extreme drought year. And this is based only on 1,000 square foot surface. So far, as of March 31st in Arcata, that was over 15,000 gallons of water on 1,000 square feet. Redway, almost 21,000 gallons, leading the charge here. Much shorter wet season in Redway, much hotter, drier summers. But look at all of this water that was already available just on 1,000 square foot surface. Going back to rural environments where there doesn't tend to be a lot of rooftop structures, retention ponds are really good with this. They are not lined. This is facilitating groundwater recharge. These are also sited at seeps or erosion points. So we have a road up here. This was a bad erosion site. Water against earth, water wins. Water against water, it's a wash, it's a draw. So anytime you can battle water with water and stack other functions, so now when it's raining, we have this capacity, 10 feet by 2 feet, that's 1,500 gallons. That's standing volume. But this is continuing to be recharged and overflow, recharged and overflow. And we're also creating vernal habitat. Okay. We're managing our land appropriately. We're harvesting as much water as we possibly can. We're catching it. We're storing it. There's lots of different ways that we can store this water. The important thing is that we focus on how we store this water. We know the volume. We know how much water we have to store. We make sure that that water is clean going into our storage and leaving our storage. We're paying attention to how we are linking our systems and integrating them with other systems. We're making sure that we have fail-safe mechanisms and paying attention to where that overflow is going. Storing high in the landscape is very important as well. Here's the math on that. 1 foot of head is 0.43 psi. So pressure adds up quick. So the higher in the landscape you can store your water, the greater pressure you're going to have for utilization. Now, we're using our water. How many times can we use that water over and over and over again? So, recycling water, graywater systems. This is an example of a branch drain system for laundry to landscape systems. So, washing your clothes, that water gets discharged into a landscaped area. These are basic mulch basins. You'll notice that these are 5-gallon pots upside down. This is woody mulch. This water then goes in. The biologics in the soil break down the bacteria and the soaps, recharging groundwater supply. Showers, sinks, stock tank cleanouts, lots of livestock in rural environments. And again, and what other functions are we serving here? We're cycling nutrients and we're recharging groundwater supplies. We haven't even gotten to turning on a tap yet. We haven't even gotten to a diversion yet. So how do we irrigate is just as important as well, because now we're using this water. We're recycling it and reusing it in the landscape as many times as possible. But the water that we're not recycling, how are we using it? Are we using it as efficiently as we can? Paying attention to the evolution of plants. If you look at the above ground structure of a plant, it mirrors the below ground structure. So by us watering right here at the base of the plant, this plant has no reason to grow wide and deep root systems. So encouraging wide and deep root systems is very, very important. So we're being efficient with the water that we're utilizing. So here's just a little water for thought, if you will. If we look at where most diversions come from, they're first and second order waterways, meaning they're small streams and creeks, tributaries to larger systems. Well, why is it a big deal? Well, that's a big deal because those first and second order waterways, they're supplying the blue line, the third and fourth order systems. It's a massive cumulative effect. They're also responsible for the cold water inputs that are happening at the end of the dry season. So fish biology, they're acting as scent markers, and they're also making sure there's enough water in that blue line for fish passage. Just because it's non-fish bearing does not mean it's non-life bearing. Most of the food that feeds small fish comes out of these first and second order streams in terms of benthic macroinvertebrates. And there's amphibians there, there's birds, there's other wildlife that relies on that first and second order waterway. Secondly, they're the ones, the first order streams and springs, they're the ones that are responsible for recharging groundwater upslope. And lastly, they're responsible for managing microclimates. So if that first order and second order stream, if you see them, they typically tend to be a little bit deeper and stuck back in the forests. You go in there, it's a lot cooler at the end of the dry season. So they're regulating the overall temperature and humidity levels of the forest. So if we have cooler temps and higher humidity, then we have less chance of forest fires. So if we take a look at this overhead, this is an online source. It's run by the county. It's great. It's updated up to 2012. It's kind of hard to see, but see all the little purple lines? Those are all property lines. If you follow my pointer, I'm going to outline the 4 original 160-acre homesteads. This is the 4 corners of them right here. So here's one here. Here's one here. There's one that goes up and off the page, and then the 4th one. If we focus just on this small watershed right here, which leads into the Mad River, just this watershed here, there used to be 1, 2, 3 original properties that had water right diversions. Now there's 12. They're all legal, they're all permitted diversions, but now there's 12. Can this small watershed feeding into a major river system support 12 diversions? So I bring it all the way back to the mantra in permaculture when it comes to water. Where are we in the water cycle? How are we participating? And if we remember this little mantra here, we need to slow down water, we need to spread it out over a larger area, and we need to sink it, infiltrate it into the ground, because this is our largest tank that we could ever have. Thank you.